Welcome back to Firepower. Let me start with a question that sounds simple, but changes everything once you really think about it. What if I told you that no president approved 5 specific guns for 2026, yet millions of firearms and configurations just became legally safer to own overnight? No dramatic signing ceremony. No single press release spelling it out. Just a series of quiet legal moves that completely rewired the rules gun owners have been living under for years. That's why so many people are confused right now. Headlines say one thing, social media says another, and somewhere in between, the actual law changed in ways that most owners still don't fully understand. Today we're cutting through the noise. Not to hype you up and not to scare you, but to explain what really changed, why it matters, and how it affects real gun owners heading into 2026. This is not legal advice. This is a clear, plain English breakdown of what actually happened. First, we need to address the biggest misunderstanding right away. There is no official list of 5 guns that were approved. That phrase makes for a clickable headline, but it completely misses the point. What changed wasn't individual models. What changed were entire categories, interpretations, and enforcement standards that define what is considered lawful ownership at the federal level. That distinction matters more than anything else in this conversation. For years, gun owners have lived in a state of legal uncertainty. Not because Congress passed new laws, but because agencies reinterpreted old ones. ATF letters changed. Definitions shifted. Entire classes of firearms went from legal to questionable based on internal rulings that could flip overnight. This created what many people call legal limbo, where owning something today didn't guarantee it would still be lawful tomorrow. The events leading into 2026 didn't erase all gun laws. They didn't create a free-for-all. What they did was force consistency back into the system. And consistency is far more powerful than most people realize. Let's break this down into the 5 major legal doors that quietly opened. The first door involves AR pistols and stabilizing braces. Under the previous ATF interpretation, millions of AR pistols equipped with stabilizing braces were suddenly treated as short-barreled rifles. That meant NFA registration, tax stamps, and potential felony exposure for people who legally purchased firearms that were once openly sold. Owners were given confusing choices: register, modify, surrender, or destroy. None of those options felt like freedom. What changed was not the technology. What changed was the government's willingness to defend that interpretation in court. The Department of Justice withdrew appeals in key cases, effectively collapsing nationwide enforcement of the brace ban. Overnight, AR pistols returned to their prior legal status under federal law. The practical impact was massive. Millions of owners went from being in legal jeopardy back to being ordinary, lawful gun owners without changing a single part on their firearm. That alone reshaped the market, the industry, and owner confidence. The second door involves suppressors and short-barreled rifles under the National Firearms Act. For nearly a century, the NFA imposed a $200 tax on suppressors and SBRS. That tax wasn't about safety. It was designed in 1934 to be prohibitive. Adjusted for inflation, it was meant to discourage ownership entirely. Over time, it became symbolic, but still represented a barrier that separated allowed from accessible. Legislative changes scheduled to take effect in 2026 removed that tax burden. Registration and background checks still exist, but the financial punishment tied to ownership is gone. That matters for several reasons. It reduces friction. It reduces wait times. and it reframes suppressors less as exotic devices and more as safety equipment, especially for hearing protection during training and hunting. This change doesn't mean suppressors are unregulated. It means they are regulated without artificial financial punishment. The third door is the one that grabbed the most attention, and for good reason. Personal defense weapons and so-called exotic firearm configurations. This category includes platforms like MP5 clones, SIG MPX variants, CZ Scorpions, and other compact systems that exist in the space between pistols and rifles. For years, manufacturers and owners avoided innovation here because the legal risk was too high. One wrong measurement, one changed definition. Suddenly, a lawful product becomes contraband. With braces restored and NFA taxes removed, designers regained freedom to build and sell configurations that make sense ergonomically and functionally without walking on a legal minefield. This is why people are calling this change insane. Not because it creates danger, but because it unlocks innovation that was artificially frozen. For owners, it means clarity. For manufacturers, it means creativity without fear of sudden enforcement whiplash. The fourth door involves forced reset triggers, often abbreviated as FRTS. This is one of the most controversial areas in modern firearms policy. ATF previously classified certain forced reset triggers as machine guns, even though they require a separate trigger pull for each shot. That classification led to seizures, prosecutions, and years of uncertainty. Under new DOJ settlements, that enforcement position was abandoned. Forced reset triggers installed on rifles are no longer treated as machine guns at the federal level. They remain illegal on handguns, and state laws still apply. But the federal definition returned to its statutory roots. The key takeaway here is not whether you like FRTS or not. The key takeaway is that agencies can no longer redefine terms without statutory backing. That sets a precedent far beyond this single accessory. The fifth and most important door is not about hardware at all. It's about the rulebook itself. The ATF and DOJ were forced to change how classifications are made. Instead of ad hoc letters and shifting interpretations, a formal classification process with defined standards was implemented. This reduces arbitrary enforcement and increases predictability. This is the real change most people overlook. Hardware trends come and go, but consistent interpretation of the law is what determines whether ownership feels stable or risky. When the rules stop changing randomly, confidence returns. Now, let's talk about what this does not mean. It does not mean every firearm is legal everywhere. State laws still exist, and some states will aggressively push back with their own restrictions. Federal changes do not erase local regulations. Assuming otherwise is one of the fastest ways to get yourself into trouble. It also does not mean paperwork disappears entirely. Background checks still exist. Registration still exists for certain items. Anyone claiming otherwise is either misinformed or intentionally misleading you. And it absolutely does not mean enforcement agencies vanish. What it means is that enforcement is now tied more closely to written law rather than creative interpretation. This brings us to the real impact on gun owners. For ordinary owners, the biggest benefit is predictability. You can make purchasing decisions without worrying that a rule will flip 6 months later. For trainers and ranges, it means offering services without legal anxiety. For manufacturers, it means investing in new designs without fearing sudden bans, but with clarity, comes responsibility. Understanding what changed does not excuse ignoring local law. The smarter gun owners become about legal realities, the stronger their position becomes in future debates. Ignorance creates mistakes. Mistakes create headlines. Headlines create backlash. That's why measured, informed ownership matters more now than ever. This moment is not a finish line, it's a reset. Courts will continue to hear challenges, states will respond, policies will evolve. But the foundation has shifted back toward statutory law instead of administrative creativity. And that is the part that truly changes everything. So when you hear someone say Trump approved 5 guns, you should immediately recognize what they're missing. No single signature legalized anything overnight. What happened was bigger, quieter, and far more durable. Entire categories moved from uncertainty to clarity. Enforcement shifted from opinion to statute, and millions of owners regained confidence without changing a single piece of equipment. That's not hype, that's structural change. The real question now is how responsibly this moment will be handled. Because every major shift creates opportunity, but also scrutiny. The future of gun rights has always depended not just on court victories, but on how owners conduct themselves afterward. Knowledge, discipline, and restraint matter just as much as legal wins. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these changes affects you the most? Is it braces, suppressors, PDWs, triggers, or simply the return of consistency? And do you expect states to comply quietly or fight back hard? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thoughtful discussion helps separate reality from rumor. If you want clear explanations without hype or panic, make sure you're subscribed to Firepower. We'll continue breaking down what actually changes, why it matters, and how to navigate it responsibly. Stay informed, stay lawful, and we'll see you in the next one.